All set? All right, so I'll call the Monday, September 13th, 2021 Select Board meeting to order. Any agenda additions or changes from staff?
None from staff.
None? Any from the board members? Okay, no changes, so we don't need to approve any changes. Next item on the agenda is public to be heard. This is a point in the agenda where attendees can address the board on issues that are not on the agenda. We have a couple of things I want to say first. We have a long agenda, so I'd like to ask you to be brief if possible. Also, please be civil. I'd like to ask that speakers refrain from using inappropriate language. We do have some families that watch the meetings together, so I'd like to avoid any inappropriate language. Please address any remarks you have to me. Please do not attack others in the meeting or other members of the public or members of staff. If you have any issues with the government, please address your comments to me. I may interrupt as you're speaking, either to try to get you to move along to your point or to try to correct something that incorrect you may have said, or to get clarification. Anything that I've missed I should bring up?
I think audience communication. We had some problems last week with people not being able to hear us because they were hearing people in the audience.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Not talking.
Right. So if you are attending remotely, please keep your microphone muted so that you don't step on what other speakers are saying. Also, members present in the room, please don't shout out during the meeting. If you have a concern, please raise your hand and I will try to address your concerns. Also, if you are attending the meeting remotely, please leave your camera off until you're speaking so that we don't take up bandwidth for others or for the meeting or add distraction. Okay, so having said all that, there's first trying to get into the meeting. Please, sir, come to the microphone and state your name.
My name is Kent Koptiuk. I live on Osgood Hill Rd. I've been an Essex resident since 1982. And I've got two things I'd like to discuss. One, I've been on a lot of public committees over the years, town boards, zoning boards, planning boards, firefighter association boards. And this is the first public meeting I have ever attended that was not started with a salute and pledge to the flag. And I'm very disappointed in that. And number two, Chairman Watts, I know my wife spoke with you this morning. I was on Essex Town Fire for over 13 years. Firefighter, an EMT. I'm a ski patroller at Smuggler's Notch for over 10 years. I was a wildlands firefighter for the federal government in Arizona back in the 70s, for the Canadian Forest Service in the Yukon Territory in the 80s, and on a fire department in Lee, Florida for over 10 years. So I've been a volunteer firefighter and a paid firefighter since 1974. And I'm appalled. I've been driving by Town Hall now several days, and I'm just appalled to not see the American flag on our flagpole. And I was extremely disappointed to not see it at half-mast on Saturday, Patriots' Day, in commemoration of all the lives lost on September 11th, 2001. I cannot believe that our town would do this. We have two fire departments in this town, the village department and the town department. We have a ladder truck if a call had been made, I can guarantee you that 20 men would have been here and women in a matter of hours with the ladder truck to replace that flag. They would have paid for it out of their own pocket. They would have repaired the rope, put a flag up in time for Patriots Day if anybody had been forewarned about it. I'm retired from the department. I'm not active. I don't come into town very often, so I just noticed this on Friday and again on Saturday and Sunday. And I really want to express my disappointment in the town leadership here. My wife made a number of calls this morning. She got a number of different answers. One was the flag was damaged and had to be replaced and was on order. Another answer was that the rope was broken. The town manager was on vacation. The assistant manager was on vacation. She got all kinds of excuses, but no answers and nobody willing to take responsibility. So, again, I want to emphasize my disappointment in the town's performance here, and I really hope that we can do better going forward.
Thank you for your comments. Greg, I know Greg wanted to respond.
Yes, please. Mr. Coptic, thank you for speaking, and I do apologize for flag not being on the mast, on the flagpole right now. I did speak to your wife this morning. It is a number of those reasons, unfortunately. At the end of the day, it was poor planning on our part, poor timing on our part. The flag was damaged. It's been repaired. The cord to raise and lower the flag is also damaged and broken. We have the fire department, the village fire department is coming on Thursday morning to replace that. We'll have the flag back up. But I do apologize to you. I apologize to the community. It was terrible timing on our part. Big oversight that we should not have missed, and recognize that. And I thank you for speaking up, and we'll have the flag up there in a couple of days.
Thanks, Greg. Betsy.
Betsy Dunn. I've been a resident since '86 here. I only have one question, and it's about the cannabis committee that you have. And I'm wondering if they've started to meet, and if so, when do they meet? And when they meet, are we allowed to have community members present during the meeting? You know the answer?
I do not know the answer to that. Well, staff can respond. Yeah.
It's an informal committee. It's only met once or twice at this point. It's a couple of one select board member, Dawn, was recently appointed after Vince Franco stepped down. It's one trustee. It's the community development directors from the town and the village, the town planner. It's a representative from the Economic Development Commission. So far, it's met when people can meet. It's hard to get all those schedules together. Usually in the daytime, usually in the morning, but we don't have any sort of formal schedule, formal meeting time. It's more to start talking about how do we hear from the community and get input and advise the select board and the trustees going forward.
I guess I'll have a follow-up if I can.
Yes.
So could you put that in the front porch forum so I'm certain that you know a day beforehand that you're going to be meeting the next morning? Could you put it in the front porch forum so people who would be interested to come and hear what they're saying?
We haven't had a public meeting about it yet. It's just internal at this point to try to figure out how to do that public outreach and start to get the input from the community.
So the meetings are not open, that's what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
It's just working group at this point.
Okay, thanks, Betsy. Okay, any other comments from the public in the room? Okay, I see Rachel Lazat's hand up online. Rachel, go ahead.
Thank you. I realize that public to be heard is not a time for back and forth, so I understand that. However, I do hope that Chairperson Watts might address the intent and background of the Vermont Digger, his quote in the Vermont Digger article of 8/19/21. I will quote, "Town officials are not even having those discussions with residents in detail yet because it would scare people. The citizens of Essex, both the town and the village, deserve an answer as to what that means, and I hope you'll address it."
Yeah, I can respond to that. I was misquoted there. The discussion that I was having with the reporter was with reference to town employees. We are certainly not talking about publicly about any cuts. We aren't talking actually, have not even had any non-public discussions about where to make any cuts or if we need to make any cuts. So it was the town employees that we were concerned about having concerns about the continuity of their jobs. That was the context of that comment. It was, I believe, quoted incorrectly in the article. Does that satisfy your question?
Oh, sorry. I was trying to adhere to not back and forth, but I think that, you know, obviously the quote was stated if the reporter is quoting you, and if it was staff, I mean, I think staff probably deserves those answers too.
As soon as we have those discussions and have some clarity on direction, then it certainly will be public. But we have not had those discussions. And I guess that's as far as I'm going to go. So, thank you for your question and your comments. Okay, I see Mary Post's hand up.
Hi, thank you. I had trouble getting in, so I just want to make sure you're in public to be heard, right?
Yes, we are, Mary. I did see that you were attempting to get in a number of times.
Okay. Anyway, I'm just curious. I would really like to know when members of the select board knew that there had been a big falling out between the two heads of the rec committee. You know that I saw the email where it said that I can't remember the name now, but our rec person was kind of kicked out of the rec department of the junction. And what concerns me is I want to know when the select board members knew about this. And because we went to 2 meetings, one was at about Memorial Hall, the other one was about the tree farm. And it was just incredible to me that during both of those meetings, no one seemed to know that there was even a problem. And if we're trying to have, you know, open conversations and the citizens knowing what's going on, I think it's a real problem. I'm not saying that we have to know if there's internal squabbles between staff people. That's none of our business. But when we went through all of this time talking about these 2 issues, and then already somebody must have known, it must have at least been Evan, that there was this big falling out. So I would just like to know when people knew about it. Thank you.
Mary, we'd have to do an investigation to figure out who knew what and when. So if you'd like that information, could you submit a public records request for that? We'd have to, like I said, we have to do some investigation for that. I can't say off the top of my head when I learned that.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary. Hey, any other public to be heard? I don't see any other hands up. Scroll down, see if there's anybody on the phone. See anybody on the phone? Make sure that. Okay. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I just, we haven't yet approved the agenda.
We made no changes to it, so we didn't need to change.
Okay, my question was gonna be, since we haven't taken action to approve the amenda, I always
I'm
have problems
sorry.
with this. To approve the agenda, would it be appropriate to add the Pledge of Allegiance and to the agenda and approve the agenda?
So there's interesting, I think we need to have a discussion about that because there's concern about the fact that not all attendees of the meeting might be members, or might be citizens, and or the phrase "under God" being in there may cause some concern with some. So there's equity questions that I think we need to
Okay,
have a
with,
full discussion about.
with the length of our agenda, we can have that discussion at another time.
Okay, thank you. All right. Yeah, we have not had that discussion about that. Okay, any other comments? Okay, move on to the First business item or the public hearing about application to the state of Vermont for Recovery Housing Program Grant 2021 under the Vermont Community Development Program. We have some folks to talk about that. Is there anything else that needs to be added to that introduction?
I'll let Amy and Dave speak, and if there's anything to add, we can try to jump in after that. Really quickly, this is something that the select board had seen about 2 years ago. That application, grant application, ended up not getting funded or approved by the state, but there's another opportunity for the same project, different grant funding opportunity. And with that, I'll let Amy and Dave take over.
Hi, I'm Amy Demetrowitz with the Champlain Housing Trust. I apologize for wearing the glasses. I had eye surgery. I need to keep the glasses on. I apologize for that. And Dave?
And my name's David Regal. I'm the Executive Director of Vermont Foundation of Recovery.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for holding the time for this public hearing and for considering our request once again to apply for funding for a great project that the Champlain Housing Trust is doing in partnership with the Vermont Foundation of Recovery at the fort to provide recovery housing for folks who are suffering with substance abuse disorder. As Greg said, we were here 2 years ago. It was almost exactly 2 years ago. We held a public hearing, and the select board voted unanimously to support an application for the Vermont Community Development Program funding. It's federal funding that goes through towns. We were to be heard and considered at the April 2020 funding hearing, and that got canceled because of the pandemic. And they've only just recently received some additional funding that's specifically for recovery housing. And so that application has just opened up. So that's the funding that we're asking that we apply for here. Again, the town would have to apply on behalf of the project. And the public hearing is out of date now because it was 2 years ago. So that's why we need to hold another public hearing. Essentially, the project has not changed, but I know the faces here have changed in the last 2 years. So I'll give you some background about that. In 2016, the Champlain Housing Trust purchased 12 buildings with 31 apartments along Ethan Allen Avenue at the fort from UVM. It was married student housing. We converted most of them, 19 homes into condominiums for sale, and those were all sold. But we retained ownership of 3 of the buildings with a total of 12 apartments, 1005, 1006, 1007. And we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do with that. At the same time, we started conversations with V4 about their need for recovery housing, and it seemed like a perfect fit. So what the plan is, and the plan really hasn't changed since we proposed it 2 years ago, the plan is to utilize these 3 buildings. Each of the 2 end buildings would be 2 recovery homes each, one on the top floor, one on the bottom floor. And that would require some renovations so that we can connect 2 apartments per floor and make them into one larger home. So each of the end buildings would each house, one building would have 2 recovery homes for men, one would have 2 recovery homes for women, and the center building would retain its 4 apartment layout. Those would be for transitional apartments for folks who are ready for more independence, and also an innovative approach that V4 is looking at of reuniting families, where one of the parent may have a substance abuse disorder, is working on sobriety. This would be a way for them to be with their families while they work through that. So that's what the project is. It's for recovery housing. It's a total of 32 beds, but it's 8 apartments, if you will, 8 homes, separate homes. The renovations that we need to do, and this application includes renovations. It's some internal changes and configuration changes, not really anything on the exterior, just general repairs. In March of 2020, so just before this application was supposed to be heard, we did receive funding from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. We also received a $200,000 grant from the Hale Foundation. So we've been making progress, even though this major funding source ran into a roadblock with the pandemic. In the meantime, starting last summer, we did begin master leasing some of the apartments to V4. So they have been running some recovery homes, not in the ideal situation because we haven't combined units. And David can talk a bit about their experience there.
Sure. So, first and foremost, this is really born out of some necessity for Vermont Foundation of Recovery. We started back at the end of 2013, and really you start with what you know. So we were renting buildings from private landlords that were willing to give us an opportunity, and all of that went really well. But what we found is that those private landlords really wanted to pay their bills and pay their mortgages and do what they can to get fair market value for those homes that we were renting from them. And it really created this necessity for a partnership with another mission-based organization that they're experts in brick and mortar and making sure that homes are in good condition and maintained really well. And what we want to do is work with individuals. We want to help to support people who have a substance use disorder and are looking to, be as healthy as they can possibly be and recover from that substance use disorder. And so it's a great partnership. And even though we weren't able to access the funding right away to be able to do the renovations that we're ultimately looking to do, it did make sense for us to start this partnership in alignment with the phasing plan that was laid out when we met with you folks before. And we did start with 12 men. So like one of the buildings on the end is functioning effectively in the same way that it will in the end, just without the interior renovations being done. And then the middle building, the top floor is a recovery residence for 6 women. The bottom floor is still 2 separate transitional apartments. So we're occupying 2 out of the 3 full buildings, and that third building is still being utilized by Champlain Housing Trust. And the idea is that we will approach the construction project starting with that building and then do some shuffling around to be able to do all the construction in buildings that aren't occupied. So that's kind of where we are. We're really grateful to be a part of it. We're really grateful to all of you for allowing us the opportunity to be here tonight. And I'm happy to answer any questions if folks haven't.
I will just follow up by saying part of the phasing plan that was requested by the Select Board and the Chief of Police back in 2019 at this point was that after we occupied half of the units, that we check in and see if there were an undue burden of emergency calls. We had that conversation, that check-in. There have been no emergency calls to the property. So we moved ahead and finished filling the second building. So 2/3 of the project is full, although at that point in the phasing schedule, it was sort of open that we could fill out the whole thing. We haven't done that because we're waiting to be able to do the interior renovations. In terms of this grant application, I will say there will be some time required from town staff, but CHT will take on most of that work. We'll fill in the application, we'll do the reporting, the requisitions. I've been working with Greg and now with Owiso on making that as smooth as possible so that it doesn't really place an undue burden on your staff. The application is due September 21st. It would be heard in front of the Community Development Board in November. We'll also be going back for additional funding from VHCB. That'll be in December. So we won't really begin the renovations until January or February, if we are successful in getting the funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
When
Go ahead now.
when you first started the project, I knew that some of the neighbors were very concerned with what was happening. Has that worked out amongst the neighbors down there, or is it an ongoing problem?
No, so I actually received a really nice communication. Even the neighbors that were most vocal about it were very clear from the beginning that they weren't opposed to recovery housing. Their concern was for the people who were already occupying the building. And they reached out to me, I don't know how many months ago it was now, but they said, hey, we wanted to let you know that, again, we weren't ever opposed to, folks with substance use disorder. We're really thrilled that they're here. We have had no issues or concerns at all. And just wanted to make you aware that they utilize a picnic table that from a distance looks to be a little bit, in disrepair, and hoping you might be willing to work with Champlain Housing Trust to, have that be in a little better condition. So I to the best of my knowledge, I think that, we're in good shape in terms of those relationships.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Go ahead,
Um,
Pat.
yeah, so I was here last time he came through, and I thought it was a great project then. Still think it's an amazing project now. At that time, we were basically acting as a pass through for the grant. So you said minimal amount of staff time
Correct.
for this for what would be really a great community good. And then I also saw, could you, or maybe I don't know if it would be best for Evan or maybe even Dennis to weigh in, but I did see, and I think that this was in the proposal before, $50,000 towards our own infrastructure needs there. I don't know if you could talk briefly about that so that you know Essex also gets something
Yes.
out of this.
Yes. Yes, there are some stormwater, there's some stormwater ponding on the, get directions so confused, not on Ethan Allen, on the, behind the buildings. So there's a little playground and near the community gardens. There's some, stormwater ponding that happens there because there's a drain that has been crushed. And so there is $50,000 in this budget to replace that drain.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other board questions? Okay, seeing none, I guess this is a public hearing. I'll go to the public. And I'll start with, I guess, the online hands up first. I see Margaret. Go ahead, Margaret.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know that in between, when people are speaking, the sound is clear, but the minute people stop speaking, there's a whole lot of white noise, which is just very odd. But my question is that when this came up, there was some concern about the people who were actually residing in those buildings that had to be moved out. And I just wondered if there was any feedback or information on what happened to those people and were they successfully relocated? Thank you.
Yes, I can answer that. We worked very closely with the original tenants to find them appropriate relocation homes. Because there was such a stretched out timeline, there was no pressure. We were able to work through as units became available in our portfolio. We were able to work with them to get in. We paid for moving expenses, utility hookups, and any difference in the rents from where they were living to where they moved to. So we slowly moved folks out over time, and I think we did it in a very respectful way. We also did it at in the federally required way, which is the Uniform Relocation Act. So we had all of the paperwork in order to comply with that ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Katie Ballard.
Thank you. My name's Katie Ballard. I'm the chair of the Essex Housing Commission, and I'm here to read a letter from the Housing Commission. Dear officials of the Town of Essex Select Board, on September 1st, 2021, Amy, and I apologize, I'm Demowitz of Champlain Housing Trust addressed the Essex Housing Commission regarding a grant application to the Vermont Community Development Program for the Fort Ethan Allen Recovery Housing Project, which requires approval from the Town of Essex and Select Board. The proposal consists of the redevelopment of 12 units and 3 buildings to be converted into 6 units to create a family environment and support structure for people in recovery from addiction. One of the buildings will be for men in recovery, 1 building will be for women in recovery, and the third will take a new approach to family reunification, with 1 floor of the building for families and the other for transitional housing. The Housing Commission, in a unanimous vote of 4-0, voted to support the concept of Champlain Housing Trust proposal manifested in this letter of support to the Essex Select Board. The Housing Commission was created in 2020 to support the needs of all Essex residents, as outlined in the Housing Commission's mission and rooted in the Essex Housing Needs Assessment. We believe that this proposed redevelopment of property at Fort Ethan Allen is consistent with our need to provide a variety of housing tenure options to meet the needs of the range of Essex residents, many of whom struggle with substance abuse disorder and need opportunities to recover in their own community. We strongly support the efforts of CHT, a local nonprofit, in addressing the housing needs of low-income and marginalized individuals in Vermont, and a strong track record as a responsible property manager. We value both the organization and its residents as part of the Essex community and encourage the select board to support their application. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Katie. Okay, I don't see any other hands up online. Any comments in the room? Questions? Okay, I don't see any, so procedurally, we close the public hearing and then move on to the business item. Okay, so I'll close the, do we need a motion to close or just go ahead and close it?
Make a motion
Usually
to
you-
close the public hearing.
Thank you, Don. A second. Thank you, Tracy. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. We've closed the public hearing and move on to business item 6A, which is to consider approval of the application of the State of Vermont for Recovery Housing Program Grant 2021 under the Vermont Community Development Program. So any further discussion needed here? We need a motion. Anybody have anything else they want to say?
I think it's an awesome idea.
Yeah,
Great project.
I think it's fantastic. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
So, do you have the motion? in
I
front of you?
make the motion that we approve the application to the state of Vermont for a Recovery Housing Program Grant 2021 under the Vermont Community Development Program.
Okay, thank you, Don. Do I have a second? Thank you, Tracy. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Best
Thank
of
you all
luck
for
with
your hard
the
work.
application. and-
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Okay, moving on to the next business item, interview and potential appointment, Stephen Dowd, Conservation and Trails Committee. Stephen, come on up. So we'd like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. Tell us why you'd like to be part of the Conservation and Trails Committee, and then
Great.
we'll open it to questions from.
So let me give you my Essex background. So I taught at Essex High School and then also the Center for Technology. I started in 1969. I taught there for over 40 years. I was also English department chairman, taught English for the Center for Technology. And along the line, I've worked closely with the Natural Resources Program. I know Brian Japp. I've worked with their logging program. I'm certainly competent with a chainsaw. I live on Indian Brook Road. Before Indian Brook was a park, I've also coached for over 40 years. I coached cross country and track and field. I took my cross country team there as a community service, and we used the trucks and things from Essex High School, and we cleaned that place up. We climbed down below that dam. We hauled all kinds of tires, everything out of there, and cleaned it up. And then people looked at it and they said, "Hey, this place has some potential." So I'm not saying that we created the park, but people looked at that place much differently after we took truckload and truckload of junk out of there. I live, as I said, I live on Indian Brook Road. I have hiked everything around Indian Brook. Bushwhacked, but I know all the trails. I know. I read the report about the foresting there. So, but having hiked it and looked at it, I truly understand what that report's about. I've also hiked Saxon Hill. That's an extensive property. It's unbelievable resource. So, you know, both of those things I have an investment in. Again, knowing Brian Japp and knowing that forestry program, or their natural resources program, I've listened to that curriculum. I understand the background. I think that I would be a tremendous link. I am not volunteering the Center for Technology for anything. However, if anybody was going to make a connection with Brian and the things that I read in that report about foresting and about labeling trees and about, you know, identifying species, that's exactly what he does with his students. So the idea that this is a venue for them to be able to teach from, I think it's a workable experience. So I'm invested. I want to be on this thing because Indian Brook is the gem. I was ready 15 years ago. There was going to be a meeting about actually the current developer who's developed along Indian Brook Road was going to develop down at Indian Brook Road. I was ready. I mean, my speech was absolutely ready to defend what I called the absolute gem of Essex, and it still is. And that is so the public use of that park, during the summer, winter, at all time, that place is a place to protect. To foster the resource, continue with the, attacking invasive species, aggressively, intelligently looking at improving what's already the gem. That's why I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from select board members?
I get your commitment to the trails. What about the conservation part of this committee?
Well, actually, I read both reports, so I certainly would be invested in the conservation portion of that. I'm retired. I walk to Indian Brook every single day. I mean, it's just my wife and I just walk the road with my dog. So my ability to understand more about the conservation portion, I mean, my time and my willingness to do that, and my present knowledge from being involved with the Natural Resources Program, I think I'm in a good position to work with that. And I have the interest to do it. It's just, I'll tell you, they also talk about foresting and about intelligent foresting at Indian Brook and sale of wood to the public. So when you read that report, I mean, that's kind of in the background of that report. I think that's a great idea. So we're not talking about cutting. We're talking about intelligent foresting and then moving it to a place where people could buy log length wood, cut it, haul it off in their trucks. I thought that was a great idea. I also, I go there all the time. I swim there. So the last couple of years, that algae bloom has been a problem. I mean, so it stops you from going and swimming there. I can't stop anything, but I sure have an interest in learning what's fostering this beyond just climate change. Taking a look at the sources coming into that pond and what might be contributing that way. I have an interest and I have some time.
Any other questions? Jason, Pat? Go ahead.
Last question, but kudos for the CTE connection. Bob Driver's work there has been great, and I was on the regional advisory board for CTE for a few years. So I think, as you mentioned, any connection that you can make, maybe even to some of the existing students or the remaining faculty that's there from your tenure, I think would be a great connection as part of the committee.
I mean, it's interesting. English teacher for 40 years. So what do I do when I go to CTE most often? I work with their building trades program because I get to learn. They're great guys. And I work with their natural resources program and their mechanical program. Good students. I mean, you got to be, if you're going to teach those students, you better be involved. You better be ready and on your game. But I love it because, that's what we do. And I agree, CTE is a tremendous asset to the community. Thanks for mentioning them.
Thanks, Pat. You already answered my question. I usually ask what unique thing you think you bring to the committee, and I think you already talked about your experience, your background, your dedication. Is there anything else that you think you have? Have you been to any? I guess an extension of that. Have you been to any of the committee meetings? Do you see any improvements that could be made, or?
I have come to community meetings I mean, I don't know many of you recently, but I mean, I've come for a long time in town meetings, and I've spoken up. I've spoken up at school board meetings. I thought it was, as a department head, I thought it was quite interesting. Some people would criticize the budget, and actually some of my friends at the school said, boy, as a department head, if anybody ever wanted to save money, Steve Dowd was the guy, because I would do everything I could to use the resources that we had. In addition to coaching forever, I currently run all of their track meets. I'm their meet director. I'm the meet director for the Essex Invitational, which is actually the New England qualifier, the largest meet in Vermont. I will always be invested with that program. I actually, my granddaughter wanted to run youth track, so I helped coach youth track this summer. I had a great time. So for as long as she has interest, I'll be a youth track coach. So other sideline thing. Yep.
All right, thanks. Okay, so there are 3 seats open. We have 2 candidates tonight, and there's potentially a third, or are there
There's more. There's another 3, I think, maybe even 4 letters of interest that have come in recently for the 3 seats.
Okay. Okay, so I guess
We had a good conversation. Did I have that conversation? Were you the gentleman I had a conversation?
Were you speaking to Darren, maybe?
Yeah, I had a great conversation with a gentleman today. So, his indication was that COVID and other things caused the number of seats to open up, and I guess that's it. That's it. That's it. But I was a little surprised that there would be that many seats. I've kind of watched this for a while, the committee and the number of openings and stuff. So when I saw that many openings, I was just a little surprised. But I don't need to know much more information other than the fact that let's fill them and do a good job. So.
Yeah. It sounds like we haven't had a discussion about this, but there seems like there's 6 or so candidates for 3 seats.
Yeah, good. At least 4, I'd say, if not 5 or 6. I have to double check the emails that came in today, but there's a few.
Okay, so I don't know, select board, do we want
So
to
wait
until we
them all.
interview the candidates before we make any decisions? So Stephen, I think I appreciate, we definitely appreciate your coming in.
Yeah.
Your enthusiasm certainly did shine through with what you said. But as has come to light here, there's a handful of candidates for a.
Right. Look, I appreciate your
seats,
consideration.
so
I appreciate your good work here. So. Thank you.
So we'll, once we've interviewed all the candidates, we'll
Great.
get back to you. Thank you so much.
Sounds good.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Chair, we are trying to schedule the additional interviews for October 4th. It's your next meeting, so hopefully not too long of a delay.
Yep. Okay. Great. Okay. Next item of business is similar discussion with Ken Signorello. Come on up, Ken.
Good evening, Select Board and staff.
Good evening.
Give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, express your interest. Why do you want to be on the committee? And then we'll open it up
I
to.
don't think I need too much introduction. Why to be on the committee? Well, I attended the most recent meeting and found that my education and experience could serve the committee well. And I made a few suggestions right off the bat, and they were well received. So I think I have a lot I can offer.
Cool. Thanks, Ken. Any that the extent of it? It's fine if it is. Sorry. I don't know.
I'm here. One Select Board member recently suggested that, hey, volunteer for something. So here I am.
Okay. Any questions from select board members?
So your background is in forestry.
I have a bachelor's degree in forestry. That's right.
So how does that serve you on the trails part of the committee?
I would say it doesn't. I think there's a lot of folks that are on the committee already that are very trails oriented and not that many that are into actual forestry oriented. So I think I'd fill a gap actually.
Any other questions?
And I have,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Mr. Signorello, I would say that certainly at points you've had a contentious relationship with certain staff members. There have been instances in the past at meetings where you have called into question their competency or their capability. If we place you on this committee, are there going to be assurances that you're not going to be attacking our staff while on it?
I don't remember ever attacking staff.
I certainly could give Sarah Macy a call and see if she feels the same way.
Please do.
Okay. I will. I have no other questions.
Okay. Ken, my usual question, I think you may have already answered again also, is that, you know, what special do you bring to the table? Now we have had heard some expression of concern that conservation is given a little bit of isn't given as much attention as the trails are by that committee, and it sounds that's the
I think I could fill that gap.
part you'd like to fill. You'd like to have.
I mean, I'm particularly interested in invasive species. Many of you probably saw this last spring, we had quite a nice infestation of gypsy moth, which are an invasive species. Now, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but there's quite a load of egg masses on trees, both urban and rural. And they hatch next spring if we don't have a wet spring. And they will defoliate the oaks pretty thoroughly. And this will be the second season. That could cause some serious damage. So one of the projects that I suggested right off the bat was we should be doing a survey to identify where you have heavy egg mass. Be prepared to spray. There's a bacteria spray that can be done if necessary. The state's apparently looking into it, and we could provide that information, I think, just by getting a public outreach going, getting a survey, getting a systematic sample. I think that would be great. Plus, I believe in community outreach. I think you've seen the ability that I have to mobilize public, and I can actually get on the urban side. So if you go out with the committee for the Emerald Ash Borer survey, a lot of people are very interested. They walk their dogs, they see the egg masses on the trees. In the urban setting, they can actually be mediated by removal, if you know how. So I'm very keen on these invasive species. There's knotweed everywhere. I see it everywhere now. And there are ways to get rid of knotweed that are very innovative. Goats. And then covering with tarp. So I really am into the conservation in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Any other?
I have to ask a question. In reading your application, what is biometry forest?
Biometry used to be called forest mensuration, but they got rid of that name. Now it's called forest biometry. That's the analytical aspects of forestry: measurements, inventory, sampling, statistics, that sort of thing. So that's why I suggested the sampling of the egg masses. It would be a great thing to do. It'd be like geocaching. I think the public would be very keen on going out to locations and counting the egg masses and then producing a GIS map of a heat map of where the infestations are.
All right, anything else? All right, Ken, so
You'll let
you
me know.
heard from Steve, and we wanted to interview all the candidates before we make a choice, and we'll get back to you in a couple of weeks once we've completed those other interviews, and thank you for stepping forward.
Happy to do it. Thanks.
Yep. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, presentation and discussion of potential changes to public nuisance ordinance. Who's got that?
Lieutenant Kissinger is online, I believe.
Yes.
Right, go ahead.
So the proposal we're recommending to the select board is adoption of the public nuisance ordinance. Currently, the town does not really have an ordinance that encompasses all the things that are listed in this public nuisance ordinance. I believe the ones that are only currently covered are public nudity and open fires, which can be found in a different section of the town ordinances. So everything on this public nuisance is pretty much new presentation to the town.
Okay, and are you asking us for questions about it, or what?
Yes, if you have any questions about the ordinance itself, the way this came about was some of the things that have come up over the past years that were not backed by ordinances. Most of the ordinances of the town are derived from 1996 and have not really been updated until recently.
Go ahead, Greg.
Just to remind the board and the public of the adoption process for ordinances. Once the select board is ready to adopt an ordinance, we warn it in the newspaper, we warn a public hearing. You determine the terminology is that you give it passage and then warn for a public hearing. If there's no changes after that public hearing, you can give final passage. The ordinance takes effect once it's adopted, unless you specify a different date. So, with what Lieutenant Kissinger has prepared for you tonight, hoping to get some. If you have any thoughts, concerns, comments, the police department and staff can then work together and make any changes to present to you at a future meeting and go through the rest of that process. The hope tonight is to get the initial reaction, initial impressions, and prepare it for adoption.
Okay. Greg, any? Go ahead, Don.
I have to say, I really liked what I read. It's been a long time in coming. And this will help your officers, is that correct? And it also lines them up with other ordinances?
It will. This just allows us another level. Not necessarily we have to write fines, but it gives us another intermediate step before we take any criminal action if we decide to go that route. It also gives us something to back up. So if we tell someone, hey, you need to quiet down, and make them aware, educate somebody first about the new noise ordinance. And then we have another level instead of going to right to criminal charges for noise in the nighttime, we can issue them a civil ticket if that warrants it. So it's just another level. It gives us more options, not necessarily that we always have to take criminal action or civil action in issuing a ticket, but it gives us something to enforce what we're educating them on.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, Rob. I had questions about two specific mentions as part of the dog.
Okay, that's okay.
One of them was falsifying the breed of dog. Is that a problem that's happened? And if so, I guess I'm just curious.
That came up with, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you, please.
It's not necessarily the residents that are doing that. This came up with the previous chief, Chief Geary, where we had an instance where the local shelters, when they're trying to get rid of a dog or find a home for a dog, they don't generally give the correct mix. They call it a mix instead of saying it's a certain breed. That's what we're trying to kind of limit a little bit if we can. It's nothing that the residents do. It's more of the kennels trying to get homes for dogs that would normally probably not find a home because of their mix or their breed, so to speak.
Okay. All right. And I did have a question about the 6-foot leash on sidewalks, but I thought myself through it, and I think that makes sense. So I think that's my only question.
Yeah, actually the 6-foot came up with one of the last couple sessions of select board where resident brought up problems with Saxon Hill Park and dogs in the parking lot. I think a 6-foot leash would allow better control of a dog in those restricted areas versus having a longer leash. It gives more control of the dog. That's where the 6-foot came from.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I had a question about the violations and penalties. I have had conversations previously around the rationale behind them resetting each year. So if someone hits their on, say, December 30th, and then there's another offense on January 3rd, is there a reason why that should drop back down? Or should they stay at that higher level? It kind of gives an incentive just for the month changing.
Correct. That is set by statute as a calendar year. We ran the same problem with winter parking. That happens to us every year. July or January 1st, we have to start back over at ground zero. And I believe the wording from the legislature for authority is it's a calendar year, not based on a fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Don, did you have another question?
No, okay.
Yeah, the other question I had is I did email to you earlier. We often see comments in, say, Front Porch Forum about noisy cars, noisy vehicles. I think you answered that the measurement requirement, the measurement of the loudness of noise is not required in that case. Is that correctly?
Correct. It's express prohibition. So any noise from a vehicle would be a violation. The sound meter is more for someone complaining about noise coming from a business or a residence down the road, and it gives us something that's not subjective. It gives us an objective way to determine whether or not there's a violation. We ran into this in the junction over the years where someone would complain, and it was always subjective to the officer. Whether or not it was a violation. This takes a little bit out of there, and it gives us a standardized criteria in which to measure if there's a violation or not.
So do we have the equipment needed to do that, or do we rent it, or how do we deal with that?
We currently own 2, but we have to send those out for recalibration. So that would be the only expense, is to recalibrate those on a yearly basis.
Evan, you had a comment?
So, Lieutenant, if you have a car, it's usually the muffler that's been altered or something like that, and they rev it up and it pops. Does this ordinance cover that type of sound emission?
That's what it was intended for. Because we do have a lot of people that take pride in their vehicles and put aftermarket parts on there, but they don't understand the disturbance it causes when it backfires because of the compression of the gases coming out of the cylinders. So that's what that was geared for, is to try to eliminate that through education. And if we keep getting repeat offenders, then we could take some type of action.
Go ahead, Tracy.
To follow up on that, the language states defect in vehicle or operation of a vehicle. If someone purposefully modifies their car to do that, is that still considered a defect?
Not if it meets government standards. Like if someone, I guess you would call it a defect, is if they took out the catalytic converter and ran a straight pipe, that would be a defect because that doesn't meet guidelines by Vermont Inspection Manual.
Okay, so defect does not necessarily mean that something's broken. It's been potentially something's been modified to be out of spec.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
So, can I ask a follow-up then? So these loud mufflers, they don't pass Vermont state inspection because of their emissions. So how are they allowed to be on the car? Without being violation.
I'm not sure how to answer that question. I don't know about the emissions, if the emissions are tested like they are in other countries. As long as they have the catalytic converter on there, that captures most of the gases or creates enough heat to burn those gases. And just the muffler itself before the exhaust exit is what causes the different variations of sound. So you can have a quiet muffler, you can put on a semi-loud muffler, or you can go a full obnoxious muffler.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This was one of the list of things that people really complain about. And so this is the answer to giving the police a tool to address them. We don't have many, we have a few, but this is how they address it.
Like it.
Same thing with dogs. We have many, but we have a few that it's not the dog necessarily, it's the owner who believes their dog is a wonderful dog and would never hurt anybody until he meets a dog he doesn't like. And he happens to be off leash or on too long of a lead for the owner to address it. It gives the police a tool to address that situation.
The other question about dogs that I have is there's a new definition in there of potentially vicious dog. Where's I know the vicious dog very specific statute on that. This is beyond that, correct? So that we're adding in a new criteria.
Yes. The reason for the potentially vicious dog is twofold. If someone's dog comes into the community, it allows us to make a complaint to the select board, either through a citizen or the animal control officer or a police officer. We don't always necessarily know the history of a dog moving into our community. And some dogs act in a certain manner that could be potentially vicious. And this is one way to track that dog before something does happen. We can establish a pattern of behavior that we can present to the select board as far as this dog being potentially vicious before something does happen.
Okay, so is there a hearing requirement associated with potentially vicious dog complaints?
I don't believe there is, not like there is defined under vicious dog for the state.
Okay. Okay, so in a situation of a complaint like that, it would come to the select board of the next available select board meeting. We don't have to call a special meeting to address it if there's no, because this vicious dog you got to do within a certain number of days of the complaint.
Correct.
Potentially vicious. We're not putting that requirement in.
No, it is not.
Okay, thank you. My other question is around. I think I made a confession to you yesterday or this morning that I last evening I cracked a beer and then walked down the street to my neighbor's house. So I violated our being potentially container law. My wife was walking next to me with a glass of wine, so we're both potentially in trouble there.
Would not have said her.
So, I guess my question there is is there a specific problem we're trying to address there? And I do understand, and because I knew this was on the agenda, I have to also say that I did intentionally open the beer before I walked down the street so that I could get away with it last time. So is it it's already I think it's already illegal to have an open container in a vehicle, right? So
correct.
We're just
so this is
go ahead.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was gonna go ahead. I was gonna ask you what the intent was.
We're trying to look at all aspects of the community, especially the growth period that we're experiencing. And we also have other venues where permits are being granted to have concerts and other venues to get people out. So if they are to wander off those premises, it gives us a way to handle the situation. Again, it's not necessarily something that we have to take action on every time. We would prefer to educate people, but there are a few people who refuse to accept the education, and it allows us to way to enforce that. You know, the main goal is to have something that if something does go beyond the casual education, that we have something again to back us up. Whereas right now, if we told someone, hey, you're off the grounds where you can have a beer, you need to go back, and they say no, we can't do anything about that. So it's just a tool that's available should we need it. And like I said, our first line to be is to educate people. We're not out there trying to write all kinds of tickets. It's more of an educational, but it's also nice to have a piece to back up the education.
And a little bit of concern I have with some of that is you said that it's possible that it's not always enforced. I just need to make, I just want to comment that make sure that there's no bias associated with how it's enforced. We are certainly going through discussions about equity and so forth, and in a situation where we're putting in place something that we saying up front that we may choose or choose not to write a ticket for or enforce, that we aren't unintentionally establishing a built-in bias of any kind. Just want to make sure that we're aware when we talk about, you know, bias training, that these kind of things can also play into it.
Correct. We can, just like issuing of tickets, it's up to the officer's discretion. Under our current CAD RMS system, we can identify any potential biases if we see an officer issuing tickets or issuing warnings to a particular race instead of across the board. That would allow us to identify there's potential bias there and make sure that officer gets retrained on the implicit biases that might be pointed out by the CAD RMS system and reporting system.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments? So procedurally, we're going to have a public hearing on this later. Do we want to take public comment now, or what's the typical?
Yeah, I think if there's any public comment that
Yeah.
influences how you look at the ordinance or how the police want to consider the ordinance, it'd be helpful to have now.
All right, I've seen Margaret Smith's hand up for a while, so go ahead, Margaret, and I'll get you, Betsy, in a minute.
Hi, thank you. I have two quick comments. One is that I've been over at Indian Brook where people are very reluctant to leash their dogs in the parking lot. And if there's any suggestions to people who are there with their dogs leashed in as far as how to handle that. And the other comment I have is that the stoplight at the corner of 128 and Route 15 seems to be a place where those folks with loud mufflers like to stop at the park at the stoplight, and when the light changes, they like to gun their motors as they go up 128, knowing there's not another stoplight or stop sign until they hit Milton. And you know, I've heard cars at 2 a.m. doing this, and it's pretty chronic. I can't recall that I've ever seen anybody with a radar gun there, although I'm sure it happens. But I'm wondering how to address the sound issue. I've had people say, "Oh, what a great spot," and then they hear the noise, and they say, "Wow, it's really noisy." So I'd like some advice with where to go with that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Margaret. Let's see, I saw Betsy's hand next, so go ahead, Betsy.
Thank you, Andy. I guess I have only one observation, is that it's alcohol. And given that there is marijuana as well that's out there that people can have, should this be alcohol marijuana kind of slash, so that you're not having to recreate, because it's already legalized. Not that we're selling it, but it's just that it's legalized. And should they have the same kind of knowledge that this also applies to that? This is how it works, and these are the penalties. Just a thought.
So I think it's already regulated at the state level that you can't smoke marijuana in public.
Well, so is alcohol regulated, but you can't go.
The outdoor consumption is go by town for alcohol.
Oh, really?
I believe that, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, let's see, where am I going next? Patty Davis,
Can you hear me?
very faintly.
Oh, can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay. So Mr. Kissinger, thank you for such a really nice ordinance. I love everything about it. I just want to point out and get your feedback, you too, Andy, on so one day at Saxon Hill, this woman, I just know her first name was Allison, came out of the woods with a dog, bleeding and bitten really badly. And she complained to the town offices, and I don't know if she complained to the town manager directly, but what happened was the dog was loose and she was way out on the trails, in Saxon Hill. And the problem is she didn't know that she was on somebody's private property. She was on someone's private property. The private property she was on, they apparently allowed Mallance Bay dog, a group of dogs that this woman took care of. And she lets them loose. She's from Mallance Bay. I don't know the name of the outfit. And she lets the dogs loose, to roam. It's like a dog business, a pet business where she picks up the dogs. Anyway, this woman that owns the Mallance Bay place, the dogs attacked this Allison's dog, and she carried it out of the woods bleeding and stuff, and it was bitten. But two problems. Allison doesn't know where she is on the Saxon Hill property, where it's town property or someone's private property. And she didn't know that her dog went off into this private property, and that's how it got attacked by all these loose dogs from Mallance Bay, a business that a woman owns. Anyway, it's a real problem at Saxon because we have no wayfinding signs. People don't know where the hell they are when they're in the woods. And I really love your ordinance. So I don't know how you can address that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Patty. I believe the vicious dog ordinance would cover dog on dog attacks, but the question about whether what property the dogs were on is not part of this ordinance. That would be a Parks and Rec discussion, or maybe I don't know. Yeah.
Saxon.
Anyway, it's a big problem at Saxon, and I've addressed it many times, but nothing gets done. But I really like your ordinance. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thanks, Patty.
Saxon Hill and Indian Brook are very large properties.
Yeah.
It would be very difficult to. But I
Put a
will
fence around
certainly
the whole
talk
thing.
with Ally Vile, the director, about where certain signage could be placed adjacent to other properties. We have struggled since I've been here about dogs off leash. As a dog owner, I keep mine on a leash, but people like to have them roam free. And if you probably asked, it's 50-50. And I know that there are a lot of parks in other communities that do not allow dogs off leash, but we've just never really come to a consensus on them.
All right. Thanks, Evan. Mary Post, go ahead.
Regarding what Evan just said about 50-50 and the dogs, when you take the 150% that wants to have the dogs off leash, that means that there's a lot of potential for biting and injury. The other 50%, it means that there's not the same potential, and yet everyone can still be out with their dogs. So it seems to me that it just makes more sense to say it's about time that dogs need to be kept on a leash, including at Indian Brook, especially what's happened now lately to that girl, the young girl that got bitten. And I don't know if anybody's come forward yet, but the whole thing is just really too bad. And it's too bad for the dogs too. Secondly, I can't believe I'm saying all this actually. But when it comes to the ordinance part about the open container, I have this kind of gut feeling that says I'm having a little bit of trouble with more restrictions maybe put on people, even though you say you would use it for education, but it would be there if you needed it. I would kind of rather wait until we really need it. If it gets to be a problem, and let's revisit it and then add it then. I personally have always only had good relationships with the police, so this isn't about that, but it's more about everything that's going on in the country now and how I think despite our best efforts, it's real easy to go after certain groups of people and even young people that may react in a way that's not good and is going to put them, you know, somewhere on a spectrum that they don't belong. So I would just rather we kind of chill it on that a little bit. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mary. Okay, I don't see any other hands up online. Ron, I did see your hand up. Chief, I saw your hand up for a while. Did you want to comment?
I just wanted to comment that the village is also looking at very similar ordinances this, and they're just about. I think they're going to be looking at it next week. I think for final passage on that, and that's where a lot of parts of this come from, is to bring this in line with that ordinance that's also being passed over there. So some of that is carryover from things that were also in that ordinance.
All right, thanks.
Chief, since we didn't get a chance to talk this week, I'm sorry, this will come out of the blue, but these are mostly tools for the toolbox, correct? We have some issues with these, but it's not rampant. But sometimes you get some people that a warning's not enough.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, but a lot of these are as a response to things that have come up, like the lieutenant said, over the years, where we've come into issues where we didn't have something to deal with a problem. And in the case of the alcohol, portion of the ordinance, that was as a response to a request and complaints that we were receiving from folks who were walking around mainly Railroad Avenue area carrying alcohol. So in order to bring things in line, it's included in the town ordinance, but certainly, it's another tool for us to have if we did have that issue.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Chief. Let's see, I now see Lorraine Zaloom's hand up. Go ahead, Lorraine.
Sorry, that's a latecomer. Just a real quick question on the urination, defecation, and definition of public. There was a neighbor that was publicly urinating on their own lawn, and a young child who's related to me could see them. Does that fall under that at all?
Good question. I believe it does. Let me double check really quick.
Sorry to throw that one at you, Rob.
That's okay. That's okay.
Hey, I raised boys, you know, it's not a big deal when you're a boy, but to some of us girls, not so cool, you know?
Yep.
Find that question there.
So the way it's currently written, it does not cover residential. So this would be all public spaces. So if the board would want something to cover that, then that would have to be written in there. This is only in reference to public places.
And I actually don't really have a problem with someone urinating or defecating in their own property. It's just when you're in some tight neighborhoods like we are, and you can see it publicly just because you're in your driveway. Yeah, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah. Again, this has come about where we've had people actually do that in front of restaurants. So we have to have something that we can deal with it. But as far as on someone's private property, that's going to have to come from the powers to be.
I appreciate the feedback. Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome.
That's a good question, Lorraine. Thanks for bringing it up. Right. I don't see any other new hands up. Comments from the room. Select board comments. Hey, do you need anything from us tonight? It's just
no, what I would say is though, you've heard your own conversations and that of the public. If there's anything that struck you between now and say your next meeting, please let us know. We'll send it over to PD. But other than that, it sounds like you've been satisfied, and we'd like to finish out this process.
So we could both put it at public hearing or not? Is that how that goes? No, Greg. I'm sorry.
We didn't warn it tonight to take any action on it, so we'll get it on a upcoming agenda, probably October 4th, hopefully, to take action to give it preliminary passage and warn the public hearing, probably for 2 weeks later for final passage.
Should we do it on the joint one? They have to do it then.
I think you have a fair number of things to talk about at the joint meeting, and not sure if you want to add one more thing to the agenda.
I would like to get this out of the way as soon as we can.
Yeah. If the rest of the board feels differently and you want to take it up next week or two at a joint meeting, I can bring that up.
I follow the logic. I think that when we hold a public hearing on this, it is a dog related issue. Since it's going to come out, we will probably hear a lot of people wanting to weigh in on one side or the other. So I would hesitate to do it on a joint meeting, because I think during the public hearing, we can't control if there's going to be one person who shows up or potentially 20 people who show up. And from what, in my experience in the past, it's been people get very passionate about dogs and leashes. Yes. So
But
I would.
I'm sorry, I mean, but to warn it, that's not the same as you're warning the date of the public hearing, right? Is that when or did I miss?
But it's still an opportunity for people to
doing
weigh
that,
in
okay.
at their
Got it,
first
okay.
review.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
Got it now.
no, not at all. Like I said, I agree with you about timely passage. I just think that during a joint meeting, we would probably potentially paint ourselves into a 2-hour-long conversation.
Understand, thank you.
Okay, so we'll
Yeah.
move on to the next agenda item. Okay, moving on to 6E, consider approval of preferred alternative for scoping study for improved pedestrian facilities and stormwater infrastructure at Tanglewood Drive.
We have Aaron here tonight.
Annie's with us.
And Annie.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the town received a grant to conduct a scoping study to look at ways to improve pedestrian facilities and stormwater infrastructure on Tanglewood Drive between Woodlawn Drive and Cindy Lane. Currently, there are no pedestrian facilities in this section, and the stormwater infrastructure has deteriorated, and there is also erosion at the outlet of the stormwater system at the end of Fern Hollow Road. So all of those things need to be addressed. The grant was through the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission's Unified Planning Work Program, and Stantec was selected as the consultant to conduct the study. As part of the process, we identified 5 alternatives that were narrowed down based on public input. Israel Maynard is here from Stantec, and he will be presenting the background of the project and the different alternatives. And the goal is for the select board to endorse alternative 5 as the preferred alternative of the study and allow staff to move forward with implementation. So Israel will go more in depth with the different alternatives so that the select board can understand what that means. Israel is on the line. I don't know how we're supposed to do the presentation. Is he going to share his screen? Awesome.
Yes, there you go.
Thank you.
There we go. Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you for the introduction, Annie, and I'll jump right into our slideshow that we have. So first off, just introducing the full project team from Essex Town. We have Annie Costandi, Dennis Lutz, and then from CCRPC, we have Brian Davis and Chris Dubin. I believe Brian's on the call, but Chris is not. And then myself from Stantec. Just a quick project background. This is the location we're talking about is Tanglewood Drive between Cindy Lane and Woodlawn Drive. Just to give you a quick orientation on this map, here's the middle school, here's the park and fire department. Sand Hill Road is right here. The focus of this, as Annie mentioned, was bicycles, pedestrians, and the stormwater management. The existing condition in this road is a speed limit of 25 miles an hour, a right-of-way width of 60 feet. The road has 16-foot lanes and 4-foot shoulders in both directions for a paved width of 40 feet. There is parking on the street occurring. The area is entirely residential with schools and athletic fields on the south side of the neighborhood and a park and town pool on the north. The existing condition of the drainage system, as was mentioned, it's in pretty rough shape in certain aspects. There has been projects in the past to help out at the outlet. As you can see on this picture to the left, it is a stable outlet with new pipes, but downstream is very heavily eroded with significant channel incising, and as you can see, some slope failures are occurring in that channel. So the purpose and need of the project was, to address the drainage problems, provide inviting pedestrian travel route for the residents, and then facilitate use by all age groups, experience levels, and trip purposes. So let's jump into the alternatives. For every scoping study we do, there's a no action alternative. In this case, the no action alternative included a pavement overlay, which is a maintenance that's kind of needing to happen regardless if we do anything about pedestrians or stormwater. Alternative 2 that we looked at was narrowing the roadway width and using the additional width for a 5.5-foot green strip and a 5-foot bike ped path and stormwater treatment in the green strip. Alternative 3 was maintain the 40-foot roadway, stabilize the outlet erosion, and extend the closed drainage further down to fill in some of the eroded area that I just showed in the previous pictures. Alternative 4 was maintain the 40-foot roadway width, use underground stormwater storage to reduce peak flows to the outlet. Alternative 5, which is the preferred alternative, which is to maintain the 40-foot roadway, use stormwater filtration practices to treat stormwater quality, and then stabilize the outlet erosion and extend the closed drainage to a more stable outlet. So just going a little more in depth into these alternatives. This is a cross section of the existing roadway. In this case, alternative one, it would just be paving. We could potentially add pavement markings to designate the shoulder as a pedestrian and bicycle area. Alternative two was the most extensive work. This would narrow the roadway down, add green strip with stormwater treatment, and then a 5-foot path on the side. Here's alternative three. This maintains the full width roadway on Tanglewood Drive, reline the pipes to increase the design life of those stormwater pipes. A few of these drainage structures would be replaced because they're in really bad shape and just need replacement. And then we would be bringing in fill to fill in this eroded channel and extending the closed drainage down a bit further to an area that's more stable so that we don't recreate this issue after we fill it. Alternative four was adding storage structures along Fern Hollow Road to detain peak flows, which would result in a reduction in peak flows at the outlet to reduce the likelihood of further damage to that channel. And then alternative five, which is the preferred alternative, is similar to the previous 40-foot alternatives, would be an overlay, relining the stormwater pipes, replacing a few of these structures. And at the end of this closed drainage system, we would be building a underground stormwater filtering practice to treat water quality. And then we would be filling in this outlet area where it's heavily incised and has slope failures, and extend the closed drainage down to the stable area a little further to the north. We did a quick evaluation matrix here that just kind of summarizes the benefits to each alternative, and with a rough project cost that includes right-of-way, planning, engineering, and a little bit of extra for construction cost escalators. And as you can see, our preferred alternative does address the drainage problems. It doesn't really technically increase active mobility because we're not changing any of the pedestrian accessibility along Tanglewood. In discussions with the residents, they felt that the wide road was allowing them to use this as a pedestrian area, even though it's not specifically designated as one. And that was one of the big drivers for going with alternative five, is that the feedback we got from the community in this area was that they really like this road the way it is, and they did not want to see it narrowed down with a separated bike and pedestrian path. So as you can see, we also reviewed some of the potential impacts, which would be traffic operations. As you can see, none of our alternatives were going to be an impact to traffic operations. The volumes on this road are exceptionally low. It's a no outlet area where there's not a lot of through traffic or no through traffic. It's all residential commuters. For safety, there was only an improvement in alternative two where we're separating pedestrians. Right of way, none of these required purchase of individual right of way. And environmental, as you can see, most of them, there was no impact. Alternative 3 and 5, where we're extending that closed drainage system, there's the potential for a minor wetland buffer impacts, which could potentially require a state wetlands permit. And then cultural resources, we did have archaeological and historic review done by a subconsultant, and there was no historic or archaeological impacts for any of these alternatives, and no utilities other than stormwater would be impacted. I guess with that, thanks for your time, and any questions?
Okay, thank you. Select-board member, questions? Go ahead, Don.
In your alternative number 5, you've also put in a speed table, but you also just said that was a low impact traffic area. So what's the purpose of adding a speed table into this proposal?
Yeah, so the community did indicate that speeds were an issue here on occasion. So they did feel that it might be a spot where they would want a speed table. And this road is fairly straight and very wide, so it does lend itself well to people traveling above the speed limit. So the feeling was that this would be an easy, low cost way to deter that.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, I also had noticing that there were a lot of public comments around speed, and knowing that, you know, wide open streets and spaces lend themselves well to folks, you know, pushing the envelope on speed. I was curious if there were any other traffic calming measures that you could partake to sort of address that issue, knowing that it's a problem.
Yeah, there were a couple that were considered. I mean, the big one that was considered was just narrowing the road, which was alternative 2, but that it wasn't highly thought of, I guess, so to say, by the residents in this area, and they felt that the speed is occasionally an issue, but wasn't constant. So we were of the mindset that maybe striping the lanes a little narrower, and adding some speed tables would go a long ways towards reducing speeds in this area.
I wasn't aware if crosswalks and bump outs sort of to not narrow the entire road, but just at specific places had been thought of. But I think
Yeah, we did consider bump outs. There are no crosswalks on this road because there's no pedestrian facilities. We talked about bump outs, but the impact to the drainage system, because where you add a bump out, you're essentially creating a low point, so you need to add additional structures. That would be pretty costly. And then there's the addition of the maintenance. Once you add bump outs, it makes the plowing very difficult.
and that sort of leads into my final question is, since this is a grant through CCRPC, if there are no improved pedestrian facilities, does that affect the grant in any way?
I can answer that. The answer is no.
Okay, thank you.
Pat, go ahead.
There was a lot of mention, and I don't have real clarity around it. Dennis, could you give us like a Cliff's Notes version of what the talk in several of these notes about the 40-foot road and it being necessary for fire or emergency vehicles to be able to travel down it? I guess I've seen it mentioned a couple of times in here, but I don't have any sort of clarity as to what that means or why it's necessary in that particular section.
It was, yeah, I'll try to keep it simple. It was brought up in connection with the development of the tail end of this road, which took place a few years ago. Because it is a very long road, and obviously there's issues about access back there, and I think staff did indicate, I being one of them, that the wide road would facilitate fire trucks getting back to that particular development. It's not critical. It's not in the grand scheme of things. It's not a critical issue. We have many 30-foot wide roads that do the same thing, and that could be reduced to the 30 to do that. However, I think the general consensus was that the 40-foot was what the residents in that area wanted. It serves a purpose. I don't think that there's any part of this study that relates actually to the access by fire trucks or police or anything else on a 40-foot road. 40-foot roads generally are not being built in residential developments and haven't been built. Probably this may have been one of the last ones that was built way back, in the 1970s, 60s, and 70s. There's no harm in having a 40-foot wide road. We thought in this case, when we started out, we might be able to reduce it and put pedestrian facilities in, but the neighborhood spoke up in terms of what they wanted. And in terms of the issues there, we have in fact already proceeded with some of the work, meaning we repaved that section this year.
maybe it was last year, but it was out of last year's funds. So it's been repaved. We are putting a white stripe down the side so that we'll be able to have, from a traffic travel point of view, at least a 4-foot zone on each side, which will kind of act as a pedestrian corridor. Cars can still park on the road. It's not a bike lane, but it's a way to essentially visually, at least when the snow isn't on the ground, have people view this as a somewhat narrower road. I'll go back to the bump outs and the speed table. I'm not a favor of speed tables, but again, this is an area where the residents wanted to have some form of speed control. It would do the same as the bump outs at the location we're thinking of. We did not put that in this year with the paving. Paving budget's pretty tight, but this project is one that would extend over a number of years. I say that because we paved the road, we'd be adding the speed bump to that. Another year, we will go in. Next year, I believe we've got planned. We've televised the storm drain. It's suitable to be lined. It's an old metal pipe. We're finding that most of them are getting at the end of their useful life, so we're going to line that. It's very feasible to line that without having to dig up the road to do it. We checked some of the catch basins. Some of them do have to have work done of them. Some of them don't have to be touched at all because over time they've been modified. So that's a second phase of the work that will take place. And then ultimately, I think we'd look for grants from other sources to handle the stormwater piece, which is down into Fern Hollow. That's a fairly expensive part of the entire project. We would look as grants come available to us, because we not only get the flow reduction, which helps the erosion, but with the treatment that we put into it, we'd also get some phosphorus removal. So it makes sense to kind of do this in about 2 or 3 parts. May take us 4 or 5 years to complete the whole piece, meaning the stormwater and all the rest of it. But our plan is to, if this is approved, go forward with those other elements. Like I said, we've already started the repaving. We thought that was necessary this year, so we did that, irrespective of whatever may come from the alternatives.
All right, thanks, Dennis. I guess my question is along the lines of the sizing of the stormwater infrastructure, with outlooks of more frequent heavy rains due to climate change. Have we sized things appropriately for the future, with those considerations in mind?
Yeah, so the stormwater management manual, the state manual, was updated recently as 2017, and they did increase flows based on projections of future increases in storms. So for the water quality event that we typically refer to as the first flush, or the storm that's going to happen several times a year, it went from a 0.9 inch an hour rain event to a 1 inch. So so there has been a 10% increase at a minimum recently built in. We haven't oversized anything above that, though. That's kind of just based on the state guidance, what we're going with.
The other comment I want to make is, there's a significant, one of the biggest erosion problem, other than the nasty soil down there, is the significant drop in elevation. And so, although it's not shown on the plan, one of the ways to achieve some of the reduction in erosion is to essentially use hydraulics, meaning instead of sloping the pipe down, you drop the pipe into a structure. That water then drops, let's say 8 feet in the structure, goes down in a pipe that's relatively flat, drops another 8 feet in the structure. So what you're doing is reducing that hydraulic head, so that when you get down to the point where you want to put in a treatment system, you've got a much reduced velocity of flow. So it's easier to treat that water going through, and you're not subject to the high runoff. Now, and that gives you the capacity so that you can basically design it so it's I hate to say this, but probably a slower moving treatment system rather than just flushing it out every time a heavy storm comes along. And then with the fill at the lower end, once you get to that lower end where it's flatter, Mother Nature can take care of the erosion at that point. Once you provide some remediation to the hillsides that have already eroded.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Any other comments from staff? gonna go to public comment? Do that. Go ahead, Betsy. Go on up.
This is where I live, and the 40-foot was, we wanted to maintain it. We weren't looking for a speed bump. We had asked to slow down the cars by putting in stop signs, and we thought that would be adequate. It would probably cost a little bit less because you wouldn't have the snow plows coming in and hitting it and digging up that speed bump every year. I don't know how that works. Do they know that's where they are and they lift them and go? I don't know. But I think it's a great project. I think that I'm excited about it being done. And we didn't do the road from Woodlawn up to Cindy Lane. It was just done up to Woodlawn. And so this whole section hasn't had anything extra done to it yet. So that's good. But the Fern Hollow does need to be done desperately. That's a real problem because people on Cindy Lane are losing their backyards to it as well because of the erosion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. And I understand that for the stop sign question, there are federal regulations around that kind of ruled that question out, right? Is that the?
It's not so much federal regulations, but it is. You go to the Federal Highway Safety Administration and you use all the Bibles on all the traffic stuff. You need to meet certain warrants to put up stop signs, and some of those warrants are controlled by volume of traffic, and there's nowhere near the volume of traffic out there to justify stop signs. And stop signs should not be used for speed control. That's kind of written in all the engineering and traffic Bibles. They should be used specifically in those higher traffic installations. And so that's why we did not go with the idea of stop signs, because they really should not be used just to slow down traffic. That's not their purpose. Their purpose is used for a different reason, and that's when you have more heavily traveled roads.
Oh.
And there's criteria that just aren't met out here.
Okay. The other thing about the 40-foot road, why we want to keep it that way, is it's one access to all of the Tanglewood area, all the way back to the very end and all the side streets that we have. There's over 180 homes back there. And legitimately, after 125, you're supposed to have a second access. And then having the 40-foot road, in case there's a tree down or something, there's more potential that an emergency vehicle could get through there. Because if one of our big pines came down and someone had a heart attack back there after Woodlawn, no one's getting back there until that gets taken out of the way. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Betsy. Okay, any other comments in the room? Let's see, let's see any hands outside. Good attention. Aaron Ennis.
Hey, good evening, folks. I also live in the Tanglewood development. I was set in for the initial presentation, so wanted to thank Israel and Dennis and Annie for showing up tonight and giving this presentation again. A question I had for Dennis, you hit on it a little bit with regard to the speed tables. I think in your initial presentation, you said that you kind of saw those going both ways. It was kind of 50-50 in some cases. It reduced speed, and in other cases, you actually saw the opposite effect, that it was an increase of speed, probably after the speed table where folks sped up. So I just wanted a little bit more information if you have why that option was chosen.
Yeah, the information I put out was really there's a whole bunch of different devices. Speed bumps are the ones that are much shallower, if you will, shorter. And we've kind of resisted putting those in. I've found the study that was done did show that half the time they're effective and half the time they're not. We have a couple speed tables in the community, and speed tables are a little bit different because it's a much wider, broader surface. It's gentle. You can come up and over it, but it's the width of 6 to 10 feet. I don't have the standard in front of me, but it's a substantial width. It's not that high, but it's enough that if you're going too fast and you hit it, you're not going to have an accident. But the next time you go over that, you're probably going to slow down 5 miles an hour. And it's not quite the same effect as a speed bump. We don't universally like to put them in a lot of places, but again, the community wanted to have something out there, the local community that lives there, to address the issue of speed. We thought that was a viable way to do it, and give it a shot and see what happens. Speed bumps are not that expensive or hard to put in, and a lot of times these are worthwhile to do. And if after a few years the community says, hey, it's not effective, we don't like it, we've taken some out. But if that people who live there want to have something for speed control, to me, that's the appropriate item to put at that location. And let's see how it goes. We're open to try things.
Cool. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. And just on the overall width of the road, I appreciate you guys had a really tough decision to make there. As someone who drives in and out every day, I have to drive slowly because a lot of times there are kids who are in the middle of the road or trending toward the middle of the road, sometimes because there are cars parked in the side of the road. So, I mean, there's pros and cons both ways to having the wide road versus having a sidewalk. So thank you folks very much. Have a wonderful evening.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Mary Post, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say that actually speed is always a problem. It's not just once in a while. And a lot of times the speed is not just from our own neighbors or their kids' friends that come in, but it's the delivery trucks. Even the garbage trucks sometimes just really fly around here. So speed is a constant issue. I'm a little surprised. I mean, I know that I'm just going to say, Dennis, you even said, I'm not addressing Dennis. Dennis said that, yes, stop signs do slow down traffic. Well, therefore, if we know they stop traffic, and if we know most of the community is begging for it to be slowed down, why can't we have it? I mean, just because I don't know why these, all the manuals say you don't need a stop sign because you don't have enough people. Well, we have enough people, kids and children here that I think warrant a stop sign. Also, it can be a little there's one spot where there's a curve, and when the different times of the year, in the spring and in the fall, it's almost impossible to see somebody on the road because that sun is right in your eyes, depending on what time of day you're coming home. But I just think that a stop sign is warranted. And as Betsy said, we do have to have the wide road because we only have one in and out, and that's been, against all these rules all this year. And there was one other thing, if I can think of what it was. Oh yeah, if they put in a sidewalk, it was pointed out that in the wintertime, the snow plows would be throwing snow on that sidewalk, and of course it wouldn't be plowed, so then we'd have even the narrower area for the kids that walk to school. So that's why the community really wants to keep the 40 feet. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Mary. Bruce Post.
Yeah, hi. I won't try to repeat too much what's said. I want to thank the assembled group for the effective discussions we had. First one was at the fire station in person, the last two, I think, online, and I really appreciate the give and take we had. Just a little background on the neighborhood. You've heard about the 40 feet. I don't know why the developer put in a 40-foot road. I think this is one of the first real subdivisions in the state of Vermont. For many years, it was an IBM ghetto. But there were regs or in the town plan that if you had over 50 homes, you needed a second access. Well, I think Betsy said we have over maybe 180 homes. When we bought our house, we were told by Jerry Furkey, then the zoning director, that no one could build behind us. They'd have to put in a second access, and that would be very expensive. Lo and behold, the town worked in an agreement with a developer. The town owned 2 lots that they got through tax sale, and they wanted to sell those lots. So there was an incentive to develop. And the findings were because the road was 40 feet wide, there was plenty of room for emergency vehicles to have access. So that development was conditioned on having a 40-foot access. And now to narrow it after that time seems to be going back on a justification for increasing the size of our neighborhood. So that's just a bit of the background. It's just not people prefer it. There was a definite reason for maintaining it, and the town used the 40-foot width as a justification for expansion. And speed is a problem at certain times of the day, not all of the day, but when some of these people speed, they speed. And we live on the corner of Cindy and Tanglewood. We could see them coming, we can see them going. And I appreciate the fact that the town is willing to try a speed table. And let's see how it works. I know there are standards, but this is not a federal rule or federal road. We don't get federal financing for it. So federal regulations don't govern it. There may be some standards of use, which Dennis talks about, but they're not the same as regulations that require something. But thank you all, and I thank the group for listening so actively during these many discussions.
All right, thanks, Bruce. I guess I should clarify that when I said regulations before, I should have said standards. You're correct. There's no regulation there. It's a standard. All right. I don't see any other hands up. Any other board member comments, questions? Okay, so you're looking for approval here.
Approval of preferred alternative.
Five. Someone make a motion?
I'll move that the select board endorse alternative 5 as the preferred alternative for the Tanglewood scoping study and to allow staff to move forward with implementation.
Thank you, Tracy. Do you have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Pat. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. On to the next agenda item, presentation and potential action on speed limit study on Osgood Hill Road.
Andy, I'll go ahead. We were asked some time ago, and I apologize for the delay in getting this, but with every speed study, there's a series of actions that have to be taken to do a speed study. If you're going to certify that speed study, these can go into court at some point in time if there's ever a question about whether it was a correctly adopted speed study. So we follow a standard, and that standard is contained in a bunch of documents. I've attached, in the material I sent to the select board, I attached a document called Methods and Practices for Setting Speed Limits. It's a report put out by the Federal Highway Administration and ITE, which is the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and basically lays out how you do traffic studies. And in this case, it's an engineering traffic study. It covers a broad number of things. It takes time to do, and especially in this case, the road is 2.46 miles long. It is a rural road. It's a gravel road. It is a collector road. It's a through road, connects on into Westwood. 128 kind of at both ends of the roadway. But there's a series of things that go into the traffic study, and I'm not going to go into the details of them, but just to go over them. An adequate traffic study should cover the road surface characteristics, shoulder conditions, the grade, alignment, and sight distance. We did that. It should cover the 85th percentile, and that's done through taking traffic counts. And in this case, because the road is so long, we did the traffic counts at 3 different locations along the road on different dates, trying to cover areas at the far end towards Westford, areas at the near end towards the Essex entry onto 128, and then towards the middle portion of the roadway. So we would get kind of a cross section of what the speeds were. And I'll get into that in a little bit. There's a portion on roadside development and culture, what the roadside is, who's there, mostly residential. Signage and safe speed for curves and other hazardous locations within the zone. parking practices, pedestrian activity, and any recent accident experience. And then you combine those things and come back with a recommendation. And I will go to that recommendation. It's probably not what the residents would love to have, but my recommendation, quite honestly, is that there's no action to be taken. It's a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. The actual traffic numbers showed that the 85th percentile when these numbers were taken, and I have to apologize. One of the delays was we had town construction up on Hanley and Catella, and we wanted to delay the traffic counts until we got that construction equipment off the road. We did not want to impact the study by, having third-party trucks out there going back and forth to drive the numbers. But when you look at the numbers, the 85th percentile speed is 42.8 at one location, 40.9 at a second, and 41.5 at a third. And so the question is, if that's the 85th percentile, and that's, if you go to the books, that's the standard to be used. But they also indicate in the standards that you can waive that 5 miles an hour either way of that. And with the type of roadside conditions, the fact there is pedestrian activity on the road, my recommendation as a professional engineer, and I had Aaron review it because he is also a PE, and Annie took the data, and she's a PE, so we had enough minds in on this that we could keep the speed limit at 35. Now, what does that actually mean also in terms of the traffic counts? And that isn't in the data, but I just want to give you an indication. And our recommendation is enforcement. And I know that it's hard to do that, but you have to understand the average speed out there that was recorded at all three locations. Well, at one location was 35, another location was 38, and the third location was 35. So the average and the 85th percentile are right in the range for setting the speed limit correctly. Is there a problem out there? Yes, there is. The slowest speeds that were recorded, and I'm not sure who's doing the slowest speed, were 7 miles an hour at the three locations. I'm not sure how it recorded someone going 7 miles an hour, but someone was, and this isn't winter. However, at the other end of the spectrum, the fastest speed recorded was 85 miles an hour, 75 miles an hour, and 71 miles an hour. And traveling at that speed on this road is patently unsafe, in my opinion, for the driver, and probably for anyone along the roadway. You could set the speed limit for the driver who's doing 85 at 10 miles an hour, and they still would be going 85 miles an hour. There are certain people that will just do that. I have taken the data. I sent it off to the police chief earlier today. I wanted to make sure you had that because it does indicate when those vehicles are traveling at those speeds. They're not late at night. They tend to be mid-afternoon, sometimes mid-morning. Someone has to be out there noticing which car or cars are going 70 miles an hour, 85 miles an hour. And it can be a joint process of enforcement. One would be for people to notice the car, pass it on to the police department. Even if the police can't ticket them, they can perhaps talk to the driver, and maybe some discussions person to person will get them to slow down in that zone. Again, that's the very high end. That's the exception. The average speed again is 35, and the 85th percentile is 41 miles an hour. So at this particular point, from an engineering point of view, and it's something that I feel the board has to recognize. If you have a study, which we've done, and you have a speed limit that's established by the study, I think you have to accept that. And I hate to say it that way, but the bottom line is the last thing you would want someone to do if you reduce the speed limit out there to another number, someone might say there's no basis for the reduction and end up in court with basically a copy of our speed study, and that ticket would probably go out the window. So I think that one of the downsides of doing a speed study is you get what you get. You get the study with the data that it provides, and it may not be where you want to go with the numbers, but it is what it is. And I think that once we've done that and confirmed that, I think that that's essentially what has to be done with the road out there, and that is to maintain the current speed limit. And then I'll keep quiet and answer any questions.
And thanks, Dennis. Any, no, we'll talk to have the board talk first, and we can.
I didn't know if Aaron wanted to add anything to Dennis.
Oh, I thought there was somebody behind Aaron had his hand up,
Aaron,
so
no.
I'm sorry.
I'm fine.
He wasn't, yeah, okay. Okay, so,
But Aaron helps with the study. I didn't see it.
any comments or questions from the board?
No, I think Dennis was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and my comment is thank you for following through with this. I know, like you said, it's been it's come up a few times in previous meetings and was specifically requested. So thank you for doing that. So if there's no comments from the board, then go ahead.
All right, thank you. Again, I'm Kent Koptiuk, and I've been a resident on Osgood Hill for 30 years. Dennis, thank you for conducting the study. I wasn't aware it was going on. I did see the traffic counters out there, but I didn't realize the extent of the study. I could not agree with Dennis more. It's not an issue of a speed limit on Osgood Hill. 35 miles an hour is a good speed limit for that road. The issue is the people driving the road itself. And we need enforcement. There've been a number of times when Essex police have been out, particularly when the buses are running, and they have ticketed a few people driving through. But I think we need more of it. I've seen people driving on that road at 50, 60 miles an hour, even faster than that at times. So, again, I want to reiterate, it's not a speed limit issue. It's a user issue, and we need to enforce the existing rule rather than reduce the speed limit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So no comments from the board. So the recommendation is no action. So I think we're set then. Should we get back to those that requested this, since they don't seem to be here this evening? So let them know that we completed it and the decision that's been made.
I will also talk with the chief about his availability to do a little bit more enforcement. We certainly have plenty of neighborhoods that have asked us to do it. We are short of officers. But we'd also ask the residents, if you recognize the car and the owner, please feel free to let us know what we should be looking for. We won't give up your name, but usually a ticket tends to stop the practice for a little while. And we would surely hate to have to pull someone out of a ditch if they went too fast and get it off the road. So you could be helping a neighbor. Thank you.
So Kathy, I see your hand up. Is there a specific question you need answered?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, there was a little glitch in the sound on this end. Could the resident of Osgood Hill who made the comment restate his name, or could you give me his name, please?
And could you spell it?
It's Kent Koptiuk, Koptiuch.
Thank you so very much.
Hey, Kathy, thanks for asking. Ron, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I think Evan pretty much covered what I was going to say. However, we understand, especially from the data that Dennis has given us, we understand better now when we should be there and to use our time most efficiently, and that's the biggest thing for us. We have speed is our #1 complaint that we have as a police department, and we're doing our best to address all of those. We were up on Osgood Hill this morning. Our traffic officer was up there, and then had to leave to go take a minor traffic complaint or a parking complaint in the village. So he wasn't able to stick around for very long, but we do understand there is a problem, and we'll try to make an effort to take care of that.
All right, thanks, Ron. Okay, I think that finishes that item. Moving on to the next agenda item, 6G, consider approval of retainer contract method of procurement for all projects 39,999 and under. Dennis, Aaron, got it.
This should go quick. Memo before you tonight has been provided to you folks for information regarding the use of retainer contracts as a method of contract procurement for what we deem are small projects, and that number it could range from anywhere from 5,000 to the 39 to 40,000, under $40,000. As I said, Public Works have been working on this for some time now. The genesis of this was back in 2019 FEMA storm we had. In dealings with some of the folks at FEMA, they told us that the use of time and material contracts were kind of not going to be accepted anymore as a means of procurement. We do have an emergency portion of our purchasing policy, which allows staff to go ahead and make purchases or procure contracts regards of emergency situations, washouts, culverts, if it was imminent harm to the public. But what this is going to do for us is kind of solidify a list of folks we can actually contact during these emergency situations to get these services done. If you want to take a look at the attachments, I can kind of go through the process. What we would tend to do is go out with a formal bid, basically trying to solicit contracts, retainer contracts from local contractors, any contractor really. I modeled this off of heavy construction. But quite honestly, this is a process we would likely use for some of the trades with our buildings manager. We spoke at length at this, and sometimes what we find is we don't have the bench out there on contractors. And sometimes during construction season, summer construction season, what we find is it's pretty slim pickings to get 3 quotes. Sometimes we end up with 2. Sometimes we end up with none. So it's kind of a way for us to have another tool in our toolbox to have a list of these folks that we could, hey, this is a statement of work. This is what we need to get done. Give us a price, go do this. So we're kind of avoiding that long, lengthy process of going out to bid or soliciting 3 quotes, especially during emergency situations. It's a no-brainer. Time is money, and also time could be the means of getting the traffic restored in a proper manner. If you look as one of the attachments to the bid, what we would be doing is looking to secure a 2-year contract with these folks, sign an agreement with us, which would allow us to issue statements of work. This would be attachment B of that bid. And in this, we put the need, we put what we want done, any requirements, and they offer up a price. And we accept it or deny it and move forward. The state has used this with a great deal of success. Other municipal entities have. And we're looking forward to having you folks approve this method. It would make our lives a lot easier, especially during these emergency situations that I just was discussing. So the recommendation to you folks would be to approve the retainer contract method of procurement for all projects under the $40,000 threshold. If you have any questions.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Any questions from the board? Go ahead, Tracy.
I had one question in the sort of master agreement. Is there any, I heard you mention 2 years. Is there any standard time frame for review or adding different vendors, removing different vendors? in just reviewing that master agreement?
Yeah, I did have the town attorney take a look at it. I was looking at it, reviewing it before the meeting today. There is one addition we do need to make to it, and that is to put in that agreement, the 2-year contract limit. I think over time, since I've been here, I've found that we tend to review contractors as they come in. We kind of have a good idea and a vibe and a feel of what certain contractors can offer us, what their limits are, and we use them accordingly. And I think at that 2-year window, that review process on contractors we do use and have under retainer would be reviewed at that time. And we figured, I felt, and also the attorney felt that a 2-year window is a good opportunity for us to figure out where they stand with us.
Yeah, I just didn't see that 2-year time frame and what was in the packet, so I wanted to make sure that that was on the radar. And it sounds like
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess more of a clarification than anything else. So, I've heard you say, you want these for emergency services. And I guess maybe what I'm concerned about, I don't really usually get this nitpicky about language, but I did have some concerns. Like, I know that right now, Evan, as town manager, you have the ability to authorize purchases or, fund release under a certain amount. I guess I just wanted to make sure that since our recommendation is that we approve this for all method of contract procurement for all projects 39,999 and under, that's not going to interfere with your ability to then choose projects on your own recognizance.
I'll let Aaron go first, and then
Well,
I'll
I guess
jump
that was one catch that I also found was I'd like to remove that all projects to projects. That's kind of all encompassing because quite honestly, there may be a small project that's happened. We estimate at 30,000 that we don't really want to go that route. We want to put it out on the street and get a selection of contractors that way. We would probably be using this retainer contract services ultimately for a few heavy construction contractors and also some building trades to take care of minor repairs, wear and tear. Nothing that's going to go above and beyond the.
So we had a conversation. So if you go back to, take any storm, but let's go with Halloween. 2 years ago, Halloween now. We get hellish rainfall for about maybe an hour, whatever it was. We got a deluge, and it washed out some of our roads and some driveways and some other things. So, who's calling all these contractors that move heavy stone and whatnot? Everybody is calling them. And as you can see in this current economy, supply demand. All of a sudden, the cost of heavy stone or trucking, starts bumping up. What we're looking at is, no, we want to service this contract. We know what you charge in a normal way, blah, blah, blah. We know what you can do, how you can do it. You have the right personnel, and we have a contract with you. And that's what you're going to abide by. This is one way of doing it. 2, pre-qualifying people. If we need something like HVAC work, or we have a blown roof, or we have something happens in one of our parking lots, we have the contractor already pre-qualified, pre-reviewed. We know what they can do. We know their work, and we can get to it when we need to go. That's part of what I know about this, and as well, in a situation where we find ourselves several times, you don't want us calling around. We want to be out there doing it and calling so and so saying, we need you out here on Osgood Hill Road or whatever road you could think of that has incline issues. Indian Brook, you'd want us out there.
We've been pretty lucky. dealing with a lot of these storms and having the ability to have some of our residents that own construction companies that are willing to help at a moment's notice. Again, this kind of formalizes that process. Not only with the town of Essex, and kind of get it in conformance with our purchasing policy, but also with FEMA and the state of Vermont.
Yeah, and that thanks for reminding me. The FEMA part. FEMA and their rules. You do not want to miss or not check a box or have them come back and say, geez, sorry, we know your project, but we're not gonna allow this because you didn't have the unit price or you did it this way and we want it that way. It's too expensive to get that right.
And there are many layers of FEMA review, and they will definitely kick something back that they don't feel is must.
Thank you
Right.
for the question. I'm
I-
absolutely fine with it.
Sorry. I was just wondering if you're going to weigh your decision more towards local contractors or whatever you.
I can't. The process, we offer it up. This bid would go to everybody on the street, whoever. There's a convenience factor there, yes. But to kind of keep it above board, it would have to go to everybody for our policy.
So Evan, you commented on that there's a FEMA requirement that may drive us to need to do this in order to qualify for some.
They have particulars about means and methods and bidding, and this gets us through that qualification.
Okay, so it's not just a convenience thing, it's also a kind of a requirement for FEMA.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and also the convenience factor is that we have the ability to rely on contractors when we need them. We're not waiting a month or two to get things done. We can actually go to them and say, hey, what will you do for this work here? Give us a price.
Okay. All right, any other board member questions?
It makes sense to front load that RFP process and be ready to go with an SOW when you need it.
All right, any other staff comments? I see one hand up here in the public in the room. Go ahead, Kent. Come on up.
Thank you. Kent Koptiuk again. I haven't come to one of these meetings in a long time, so I haven't talked so much in quite a while. But, I think it's a great idea. I'm a contractor myself. I have a business. Just for a point of clarification, this is a contract, 2 years contract. Is there any stipulation in there that you will award someone you've contracted with a certain amount of work over that 2-year period, or is it just a contract on their capability?
So,
go ahead.
So you're referring to the statements of work?
Yeah.
Okay. So the bid process is going to be, we would select the 3 lowest bids of the overall lump sum for like 1 hour crew time. That's what I put for the we would select those to go into an agreement. So the statements of work, it's kind of a first come first serve type of, hey, we would fire it out to all 3 contractors on retainer, and the contractor that responds first to that statement of work would be offered the work. If we couldn't agree to a cost, or we would go to the next contractor.
Okay. So you say retainer, but they're not actually being paid anything until you award something.
Correct.
Oh, thank you.
All right, thanks, Kent. All right, you ready to make a motion? You want to do that?
Make the motion that the select board approve the retainer contract method of contract procurement for all projects, $39,999.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
Awesome.
Thank you, Pat. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Alrighty. Moving on to the next agenda item, discussion about appointment of new select board member. Greg, you put a memo together. Go ahead.
Yeah, short memo, update on that. You are all available, the 4 of you board members, on October 5th. It's a Tuesday. So we're gonna schedule the interviews for that night. You should have already received a invitation from Linda to do that, so just to make sure it's on your calendars and for anyone in the public who's paying attention. Beyond that, we did this about a year ago, a little over a year ago in 2020, when there was an opening on the boards. There was a list of questions that the board asked the candidates at the time. It was all done in public session. The questions were scripted. They were not. They were made public ahead of time. That was the process the board went through. There was 15 minutes permitted for each candidate. So if that's the process you want to follow, the questions that were presented a year ago were in your packet for review. Some modifications suggested based on where we are now versus where we are a year ago. So willing to take any feedback on that tonight and be ready for the interviews on October 5th.
So one thing to make clear, I think, to the public is the deadline for submitting a interest letter is the 20th. Right, correct? That's what's on the website that I saw. So 1 week from tonight would be the deadline for expressing your interest to participate in interviews. The interviews are on, you've said October 5th.
Yes.
I assume 6:30, depending, and then going till however long, depending on the number of candidates we get. 15 minutes per candidate is what we've done before. So, select board member comments.
Well.
Yeah. I know. Two of you here at the table participated in that. Were interviewed in that session. So, any reason to change how we've done it before? We previously had actually assigned questions to select board members so that we had specific people asking the same questions to the same, or to each of the candidates. I mean, as the chair, I would certainly ask for the opening statement. I don't know, do we want to go through and assign these? Do we want to?
So every candidate receives this prior, so they would know
What
what
questions were available
which
ahead of time, so they
questions
can. Yep. And we also did not. We allowed people to stay in the room while other people were answering the questions. So.
Can I say something about that?
Sure. Yes.
By the time you got to me as the 9th or 10th person, I'd heard everybody else's answers.
Yeah.
So, and by your tones of voices, you could tell what you were looking for. I mean, it didn't influence the way I answered, but it could easily influence the way people are answering.
Yeah.
You're listening to everybody else.
Yeah. Did we select a random order?
I can't remember how we selected it. The reasoning for doing it, and if you remember pre-COVID, we used to, if we had a couple candidates interviewing for this one seat on a board, we'd always ask one of them to step out. A year ago, it was in the midst of COVID, and we were doing everything online, and it was going to be really hard to
ask people to leave.
So
then invite them back. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we're kind of still in that boat where some people are going to be online, some people are going to be in person. I think it's.
But just so you're all aware of it, that's
good to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know about Tracy, but that was the feeling. Yes, please.
Okay, so I guess the other thing is that I thought that the equity group was going to consider whether additional questions or changes to questions should be made. Is that, if that's.
They have not seen this. I will make a note to run it by them.
So, I guess I kind of almost have a feeling that maybe we should just, count off 1 through 4, and then we can do 1 through 7 on the questions, and because it's, unless you have a burning desire to have a specific question that you're asking, you okay with just, okay, once we have, I guess, the equity group review these, for any changes, then we can have we have a meeting before that, the day
fourth.
before, or we have joint meetings. I don't know if you need to, want to add any more to those meetings either. How many agendas is this one?
I think we're at about 5 or 6.
Well, I saw that. So yeah, so I guess you okay with if we get modifications to these questions, we just assign them out to folks. I don't know what we do if we get a new question. Do we want to have a discussion about whether to ask the question? That's where we run the rub there. We think we're beyond the point of adding additional questions.
Well, you said the equity group may have some. So we have to then.
So, just give you some quick, 15 minutes a candidate, 8 candidates, 2 hours, then discussion. So, do you have time to add a question? Depends. Probably. Do you have time to add 3 in-depth questions? No. So, but you want to be consistent with your candidates. Give them an opportunity to state why they applied, their understanding, etc. And you all have now sat on boards. You've been in school board, other boards. You've been on every board that they've created. You said so. What do you
I
want?
just said I was old.
So again, if there is a particular question you want to ask, make sure you ask it of all of them, and follow-up questions, and then be really respectful of time.
Okay. Speaking of time, anybody have any issues with I'll assign questions to people, and if additional are added, we can either, if anybody strongly objects to any of the additional questions that were added, then we leave them out, or we change I don't know how we change the wording. Maybe individuals can work with Greg to sort out language questions. We don't have a group discussion. Can't have a group discussion between now and then. Unless it's the day before, which I don't, we need to have the questions out to the candidates before that.
The packet will go out beforehand, and put the questions in the packet, but we can also you can discuss it on the Monday night, and if there's anything major you want to change, just bring an updated set of questions.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right. So no action is needed tonight other than agreement on how we want to go forward. Everybody's okay with it? All right, cool. We'll do that. All right. Thank you. Moving on to the next one. There's 2 executive sessions. One is to talk about the separation discussion, the response that we got from the trustees, and also there's a number of suggested documents from them in the packet that we'll need to have some discussion about, and then the other is a personnel discussion that we'll cover when we get there. So moving on to consent. We want to move approval.
I make a motion we accept the consent agenda.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Tracy. Any further discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, consent agenda approved unanimously. Reading file, any board member comments? All right, hearing none, let's go back to the executive session motions. So how many do we have here?
I have the two with the.
So we are not having a discussion about appointments for the 2 board interviews we did. Don't need that one, but it's 6I1. Yep. Right. Cause I got it up. You want me to go ahead and read it?
I move that the select board make the specific findings that general public knowledge of contracts and confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Pat. Any further discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And I move that
go
the
ahead.
select board enter into executive session to discuss contracts and confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body pursuant of 1 VSA 13A, 1A, and F to include unified manager, deputy manager, and town attorney.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Pat. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Okay. Then the other one.
I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss the employment of a public employee in accordance with 1 VSA, section 313A3, to include the unified manager, deputy manager, assistant manager, and HR director.
Thank you, Tracy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Pat. Discussion here is, do we need to come back into session after this? It's unlike, I don't think we're gonna have a decision. We need to,
Only if there's anything you want to say publicly about the draft MOUs with the shared services, but there's no action that needs to be taken.
yeah, we won't know that until we have the discussion.
Right.
And so, yeah, I guess we may or may not come back into
There won't, yeah. It's just saying something, it's not
Right.
taking action on.
right.
And, I don't know how long
Yeah,
your
yeah.
executive session's gonna be, but
Right.
it's not gonna be 10 minutes.
Right. Okay. Any other discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. We will move upstairs.
Yep.
For executive session.
So